Well, welcome, Dr. Green, to our Leaders Who Care series. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you so very much. I'm pleased to be here.
I love your energy already. That was pretty cool.
Always high energy, always excited to do the work.
Well, is that a mom's DNA or what?
I think it is, actually, yes. I think I've gotten a lot of that from her, no doubt.
Well, knowing your mom, I would agree, actually. So,
Right.
No, super happy to have you here and talk about certainly an important topic, but also what you work on and everything, which is super important and critical, and maybe not more important than maybe more important than it's ever been before. If that's possible. So, how about if we start? If you could briefly introduce yourself. And as I have to tell people, it seems like 10 times, not everything, but just where you're from, a little bit about your family, a little bit about you, and then we'll get into the rest of it.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, let's see. I'm Tamu Green, and I live in Sacramento, California. And I have a background in sociology and public health. I'm a developmental psychologist. I have a family, 2 sons, so I love dearly. They're 15 and 25, keep me on my toes. And I'm the CEO of the Equity and Wellness Institute. We cultivate well-being in communities.
There's not a better thing you could do, that's for sure. And what about, we talked about her, what about your parents?
Oh, yeah. Well, my parents are a huge influence in my life. I have a wonderful relationship with both of them. My dad is Ruvain Green, and he's in San Diego. He is a Hasidic Orthodox Jewish man and very practicing in terms of his religion. And so I learned so much from him and his way of life. And then I have my mom, Catherine Hall Trujillo, and she is also a huge part of my life. And she was the founder and director of Birthing Project USA. Goodness, since I was 17 years old, she started the Birthing Project in our backyard. So that's been a huge part of my life, is seeing her through her journey and being a part of it. And I like to say I have as many rabbis in my family as I have Baptist ministers. So we have that going on my mom's side of the family.
Plus, I don't know if this is politically incorrect, but she brings color to the table too.
There is a lot of color as an African-American woman, and that side of the family. I get to be just absolutely enriched by all things pertaining to our culture, that if you're not born into it, if you're not raised in it, you really can't imagine the beauty that's there, the joy that's there, the challenge and struggle that's there. But yeah, I feel incredibly grateful to be at the intersection of the lives of Ruvain and Catherine, who were Ron and Kathy back in the day when they met as hippies at UCLA. People are always like, how did you come about? Like, how did your parents meet? And yeah, so yes, there was a time when they were hippies at UCLA.
It is funny. I was talking about that to somebody the other day about remembering people and how something he said, like the fat Elvis syndrome. Some people, you don't want people to remember Elvis as when he was overweight. You want them to remember him the whole thing, and yet certain people will only see certain people at a stage.
Yeah,
and, it's fascinating. So I can see your mom for sure as a hippie in those days.
Oh my goodness, absolutely, absolutely.
So it's not by accident you are in what you're doing. Doesn't mean it was.
No, I mean, and yeah, so my parents met very much involved in the civil rights movement. right? And so it would make sense that, yes, they would raise a child who would have social justice at the core of her being, and, you know, that would be my lifelong pursuit.
Yeah, well, God works, as they say, in mysterious ways.
That's right. That's right.
Or whatever you call it, as we said before, energy,
Yeah,
universe, whatever.
that's right. That's right.
So before we delve even further and kind of heading into this already, we did you share with us your why, the infamous why, and like when did you discover it, and basically why do you do what you do?
Hmm. Well, I didn't know that I was going to grow up to be whatever I am. I'm a racial equity specialist, a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, whatever it is that I am. I didn't know that that's what I was going to be. I thought I was going to be a school teacher, actually. But as I mentioned, growing up in the family that I grew up in, civil rights and fighting for justice was just part and parcel of what we did. And so I never thought twice about being involved in, a protest, or doing a letter writing campaign, or, leading the Amnesty International chapter of my high school, whatever it was. I just never thought twice about it. And so at some point, I came to realize that as I was learning more and more about the challenges that individuals and organizations were facing around race and racism, that I had something to contribute in terms of helping them through those challenges, and that wasn't just from my professional background of training as a teacher, so being able to put together lesson plans and objectives and that kind of thing, training as a researcher, so being able to do the research to pull into those lessons, having some background in performing arts, so being able to work a crowd and whatnot, but also doing a lot of strategic planning in my professional career, that I could pull all of that together with my personal background, some of which we've talked about, of being able to see and live and experience a lot of different realities, living in many different kinds of communities and neighborhoods, and attending different schools, seeing firsthand the difference between, going to school in Compton versus going to school in Irvine or something like that. And so having that worldview that I could have as a basis for this professional work, and it just seemed like what I had to offer really resonated with people, that they were hungry for it and were able to act on it. And so I guess that is the why. When I see that there is still so much more that we need to do in our society in order to promote equity, we haven't gotten there yet by any stretch of the imagination. And so if I can play a hand in getting us there, and I love the work, I enjoy the work, I enjoy the people, then why wouldn't I?
No, it totally makes sense to me. And your journey is interesting with, you studied sociology, human development. You've been involved in community work with young people.
Right.
And then on to health equity, where now you're the CEO of the Equity and Wellness Institute. Have you ever found, what was that song by Cher, Half Breed or whatever it was called by Cher? I just thought of that. Have you ever found, because some people, you hear this, they aren't maybe accepted by both sides, or they're accepted
Oh, sure.
by sides and things like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that was my experience growing up. I mean, now it's very in vogue to be mixed or something, but when I was growing up in the 70s, that was not the case at all. And we were in Los Angeles. You would have thought that there would have been lots of mixed families, and there just weren't. And so, no, that was very much my experience of feeling like an outsider everywhere, and not even having any other mixed friends until my high school years, when I had a couple of close mixed friends. And so I guess I had to just come to terms with my own identity and being okay with it, regardless of what other people thought, and regardless of being the only person in the room who was like me or whatnot. And I think it gave me an appreciation for other people who very often are the only ones like them in the room, right? That we had that commonality, that connection. And so in some ways it's interesting when you're not like anyone else, it makes you like everyone else, that there's something where because you don't have your own group, then you become a part of everyone's group. You adopt this kind of global identity. And I think that that's what happened with me.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've read studies and stuff about how the thing that fills people's hearts and soul more than anything is belonging.
Yes.
And so the opposite would be you must be in heartbreak if you don't belong.
Yes.
And so you can't go to either group, like you say, sometimes in that. So you almost got to form your own group.
Which actually is something that I did when I was at UC Santa Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
Was that those of us who were mixed started kind of whispering to each other and saying like, yes, we're very much involved in the African Black Student Alliance, or we're very much involved in the Third World Student Coalition, or, whatever it may be. And yet we sort of have an experience that's unique to us, and maybe we should get together and explore that a little bit. And so we formed Students of Mixed Heritage while I was there.
Yeah.
And that was at a time when it was just at the kind of the beginning of when people were even talking about what does it mean to be mixed. But being involved in the changing of the US Census, for example, to reflect our reality. And so, yeah, I think that it's been great to kind of cull out that space for other folks to be able to talk about what this unique experience is like.
Yeah, I've always been of the ilk that's really cool and differentiating and everything else. And if normal's being like everybody else, who wants to be normal?
Well, I have to say, what was interesting is that when I was growing up, although I was very much, like I said, excluded and ostracized and like, you're not like us, and all of that, I absolutely remember looking at other groups and thinking, well, I'm really glad that I'm not just one thing, because that seems kind of boring.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm in the talent and impact business, if you will, and I'm always looking for what's the differentiator of that person or things like that. And I can understand how X years ago it was harder to do that because you were this or that, and sometimes to ridiculous extremes. But I like the differentiation, and like I said, who wants to be normal if that's what normal is? So
I think it has actually given me a leg up in doing the work that I do.
Sure.
Simply because you can't really pigeonhole me, you can't put me in a normal box. And so because I really do have family that look like you, and I have family that look like my mom and whatnot, that when I am working with groups of people, I feel this relationship to folks that is really authentic. It's even like when I walk around the park in my neighborhood, and we have a lot of folks in my neighborhood who are from Afghanistan and Syria and wear head coverings and have lots of children. And I walk around the park, and it's so easy for me to connect with them, although we don't necessarily always speak the same language, because they remind me so much of my Jewish family with the head coverings and the, lots of children and all of that. And so again, I think that there's something about being in this world this space that I'm in, that allows me to be able to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work just from a different perspective. And it's all relational.
It is all relational, but at least if someone thinks that they look at you and they can relate, then it happens a lot faster. So I think that's cool. So it's fascinating stuff. And you've been a leader who cares about equal access, I think, for a long time. And I've always found that to be at least one of the foundations of a community, basically, that there's equality, there's there's just letting inclusion, really letting people be. And I grew up in Montreal where diversity wasn't said that, oh, we need to have diversity. It was really quite amazing. It was like embrace to have diversity. Oh, what kind of foods do you eat? Oh, you should play that sport over there? Oh, you did this, that, or whatever. It just happened for some strange reason.
Uh-huh.
There was a lot of different people there, but we never said you had to be diverse and stuff. So, you know, having that, access and affordability to education and skills training, as well as healthcare. I mean, all these things. What are some of the programs and engagements that you feel have to be activated to enable racial equity to be not just, yeah, we're diverse in our company or whatnot, but for real?
Yeah, I mean, well, goodness, there's a lot. If we look at how unequal we currently are in our country, if we look at the fact that Black folks have essentially not benefited from their labor, right, over all of these years, then we have to do something about that. We have to acknowledge that we're at a place of such disparity that if we just continue to operate the way that we've been operating, that disparity is never going to close, right? The gap is just going to continue or get wider as it's been doing, right? And so we very much have to look at the wealth gap. And what does that mean? And what are some tangible things that we can do around the wealth gap? Does that mean actually providing funding to Black individuals, to Black families, to compensate, for the robbed labor of the past? Absolutely. I think that is one of the things that needs to happen. That's one of the things that has happened around the world and other places where it's like we need to make our past right. Do we need to look at our segregated society and the impact of that, of residential segregation and school segregation? Absolutely. That is absolutely fundamental. And so what is it that we can do to ensure that our neighborhoods don't continue to look the way that they look? And some of that is government programming. It's doing things like when we're doing housing programs to make sure that we are not just placing folks of, a certain race in a particular neighborhood. So some of that is like government programming that we can do. But some of it may also be incentives that are offered around, marketing and developing, right. And within that also, what are we looking at in terms of our tax base and how our tax base is funding our schools so that you have, neighborhoods of color where the schools, I'm telling you, I went to some of these schools where they are abysmal. You don't have the supplies that you need. You don't have toilet paper in the bathrooms. You don't have educators who have the backgrounds that they need to be able, to be in the positions in the schools. So is that actually providing more financial incentive to bring people in to those schools so that they want to teach there, right? And that's like the whole concept around equity, is where you're looking at what individual need is, which is different than equality. So equality is sameness, right? So if you had two different communities, two different neighborhoods, and you had $100,000 in tax revenue, and so you provided $50,000 into each of these two communities. But if one community has schools and libraries and hospitals and whatnot that have benefited from lots of investment and infrastructure development over the years, and the other one has only had disinvestment, then if you're approaching it in this equal way, you're just going to continue to have this disparity. And so what really would make sense is to, probably put $75,000 of that pot into the community that has been disinvested in, or maybe even more. And so we really have to look at our funding in those ways. And we have to look also at some fundamentals like how do we support families? Other countries have figured out how to support families by doing universal daycare and preschool and even paying for college. We don't do that here. And imagine the difference that it would make if we did. So there are some fundamental things that we need to do differently. It's not just let's put in like, an after school program.
Yeah, definitely. So that,
right.
And because you might even not get them in the program, even some of
sure.
So it's and those are foundational, almost basic, like no brainers. What you're talking about, with all due respect, that should be done. And it's fascinating. What you said before, because I look at the story of Bruce's Beach down here. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
Bruce's Beach was taken away from a Black family years and years and years ago because they were Black and people were complaining that there was this and that, and they owned it, and it was taken away from them, just taken away.
Yeah.
Recently, through the state, and they gave it back to the family. But one of the people that was leading that effort for years said, can you imagine what would have happened if they would have kept that land? And then they would have bought maybe more real estate, and they would have money to send their kids to school.
That's right.
Those kids would have maybe started a business and this and that. It's not rocket science again, but it was really both touching and amazing when you went through that story. Imagine if, because those heirs to that family that we're taken from are in like East Coast now, just working regular jobs or whatever. And so everything you say that's proof, basically 100%.
Right.
And just one case of proof.
Right.
So, and I was talking to somebody else recently too, and it used to be, I'm a big fan of, that's why we have Leaders Who Care. I'm a big fan of business leaders are the answer. Government part of it, but I think the business leaders are the answer. And it used to be, almost felt like a responsibility and something great to do, where companies A, B, and C that are in that town help take care of the community.
Yeah.
Whether it's a small town and Maytag's factories there and they're taking care of the community, or it's a big town and 5 companies are not just charity, but they're taking care of the community. And you think that's possible again?
Well, I do think that actually government regulation plays a big role in that there have been examples of the same company being located in the US and being located in Europe. And when the factory shuts down in the US, that everyone's like, sorry, go on welfare. And when the factory shuts down in Europe, there's a whole system in place, because the expectation is there that we're going to do job retraining, we're going to get people into other jobs, we're going to support folks so that they're just not left to their own devices when the company closes. So, there is something to be said about what the expectation is around our relationship with our companies.
Yeah, and part of that is doing even a cost analysis, how it might not cost as much and the opportunity might be greater for so much more good and positive for the community than them going on welfare and all the costs we spend on all the other side.
Absolutely.
That's not a good ROI, it's just keeping people down. And so it's not just about doing the right thing, which they should do anyway, it's actually better for business and better for the community.
It is absolutely better. I'm telling you, when I look at our prison numbers, which are greater than any other country, and I think about all of the talent and the potential that we lock up and throw away the key.
Well, you give me a good segue there. Sorry to interrupt. You give me a good segue there, because untapped talent's a big deal these days, and we're very involved in it. And untapped talent means people have been incarcerated before, and what happens when they get out, and what are we doing about it? If we really care about the community, what are we doing about it? It's so critical for closing that financial gap, for example. What's your experience with corporates you may deal with, or just business leaders in general, adjusting their criteria to not solely requiring a college degree, or not solely requiring, you went to that university? Well, we only deal with these universities or whatever. And and being open to specialized skills like cyber tech to ag to being a caregiver, which by the way, we're going to need tons of those in the near future, and so on.
Yeah. My experience is that sometimes they are open, that they recognize that, write the job description for what it is that you need.
Right.
You don't necessarily need the degree, but you need certain skills and competencies. And so write the job description for that. Also, though, one of the things we know is that you can train folks and do a better job in terms of getting them to do what you want them to if they're a little bit more of a clean slate than if they come in already with training from someplace else, right? And so you may actually be better off with doing your own training program so that you get folks to do the work in the way that you would like for them to do it, rather than expecting them to come in with a whole lot of training and education that they've gotten from someplace else. So yeah,
sorry, on that point, we've actually found, even with people that have been incarcerated or people under certain who don't have any skills, and the benefits are actually quite amazing. Where number one, they've got dignity now. They're actually like, wow, I'm a cyber tech guy, or I'm this or that or whatever, and they can make good money. The family feels better, has self-esteem, and the crime goes down, the wellness gets better, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing we also found is they're loyal more than anybody.
Yes. So happy to be able to be a contributing member,
right?
To have a good job, all of those kinds of things. And so why are we putting up artificial barriers to people? Sometimes on job descriptions, I'll see, that you need to have a car and a license and whatnot. It's like, are these people actually driving someplace, especially in the virtual environment that we're in? Or is that just like a relic of something, that was left over or is cookie cutter in all of your job descriptions? So yeah,
And with respect to equity, speaking about driving, this is where the community and business leaders come in, is to get these people trained. These people sounds like a terrible way of saying it, but you get people trained, and then how are they going to get to where they got to go? How they're going to work at home, etc. And this becomes a joint effort. If you're not really talking about inclusion of diversity in there, these things have to be taught about. And again, that's why we talk about business leaders. We find that business leaders take the lead in this type of stuff. Their business will do much better because of it.
Absolutely. And when I think about things like the kind of work that people are even doing in the prison system, I just learned yesterday that people are making eyeglasses in the prison system in California for the Medi-Cal program or something. And I thought, wow, now maybe there is, but I haven't heard of it. Is there then a prison to industry pipeline so that when you come out of prison, you have a job at an optometrist office because you've already been doing the work inside the prison? One of the most heartbreaking things that I had heard was that firefighters who were fighting fires as prisoners could not get work as firefighters on the outside because you couldn't be a felon or something and be a firefighter. That's like, that is fundamentally wrong.
You think?
Fundamentally wrong. So the same way that...
Why would you want to use the firefighting skills they already have again? I mean, come on, be real. Why would you want
So we may have to do some level of advocacy, in order to change the policies and the mindsets of folks around how to use the talent that we have.
I think they were afraid that they were going to steal stuff out of the house that's on fire. Or something.
Okay.
It's like,
there's a lot of structural racism built.
Well, here's the good news.
The system, right?
At least from our experience, one of our clients, and it was started by a woman, as an organization called Workbay, and it has a whole platform, including for people who are incarcerated, that they can get out, they can inside and then outside, and other people do get the skills training, et cetera, et cetera. So it's getting there, but it still has a long way to go, and there's a lot of untapped talent. And
yes,
how valuable is that? You always hear the line, one of them might have the cure to cancer of those people or something.
Absolutely.
So a little change here.
Yeah.
You know, we've been through so much stuff. The pandemic, we've been racial, you know, just justice in general, racial justice, and every other type of justice, and the prisons and wildfires, and bottom line, Mother Nature is really pissed off, actually. And she's through. So she decided, if you're not getting it, here's a whole bunch of stuff at the same time, and whatnot. Do you find there's been any quote unquote awakening of people as to what's really important?
I think there's been an awakening for white people. I think for people of color, we have had to be awake for many generations. And so I'm happy that there's been an awakening for white people, because we all need to be in this together. You know, it's not work that just people of color can do.
Yeah.
So to have real allies in the work is so incredibly important. And I think a lot of people have now started to see things that they cannot unsee, you know, that they can't go backwards. But we'll see, you know, we'll see, time will tell whether this is a flash in the pan for some folks, whether this just, you know, is a momentary kind of blip where people feel compelled to do the right thing, or whether folks will really recognize that this needs to be sustained indefinitely. And that when we do that, it means that we're talking about fundamentally changing our power structures. We are talking about fundamentally changing the way that resources are distributed. And so do we have the grit, the determination to see this through? Because we're going to forge a new society if we do.
Yeah, and it's a big job, and we do have short memories a lot of times. So you're right, and you know, not to be cute with the leaders who care thing, but you know, one of the things we encourage, and there are a lot of leaders that actually do care and don't know what to do, and
yeah.
But what's happening, we find also, and certainly has to more, is that leaders have found they're not going to be able to attract the best people unless they really do care about this stuff. And if they're not able to attract the best people, that will be not good for their business. If they do attract those best people because they're doing good stuff, their business grows much more.
That is absolutely right. Yeah, you're going to be a dinosaur, you know, essentially, if you don't come along with where this groundswell is leading us. You know, that people want to be in environments, in work environments, where they do feel respected and included. They don't, you know, have to feel like there's going to be a microaggression around every corner. And there's a lot of talent there, right? And so it is actually one of the things that I talk to my clients about when I first start working with them is you will lose people.
Oh,
you're gonna lose people who are not aligned with your values, because you're gonna get real clear on what your values are. And so the folks who feel like somehow they want to continue to be entitled to their privilege and all of that, they will not want to stay with your business, with your organization. And that is a good thing, because what that does is it makes space for you to magnetize the other talent that will absolutely want to be there, that will jump in with both feet to be there, you know, and are going to give you everything that they've got, because it's a company that they can feel good about coming to work at.
Yeah, I had a conversation really quick with Richard Branson a few years back in London. Not like he's a personal friend or anything, but we had a conversation about when was the last time people said they were proud of where they worked.
Right.
And, they might say, I like this, like that, but never proud. And what we're also finding is more and more coming back a little bit, at least in my days in Montreal, where you know, people want to work in diverse places.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
it's not rocket science. I want to know what it's like to be from Kenya. I want to know what's going on like that. It's more fun. And going back to our talk about being normal, you know, normal should be, I want to know everything about all of this stuff and learn from them, etc. So it's amazing. One last little question. with everything that has gone on, as you know, with 2020 and then 2021, I had a client in 2021 told me, year 2020, it flew by slowly.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a brilliant comment. And now we're into almost the end of 2022, which is the flying by slowly type of thing. It's like unbelievable. What are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was actually meeting with someone in my leadership network this morning, and we were talking kind of about the gifts of the pandemic. There's a lot of fallout from the pandemic, right? I mean, so much human toll that we don't even know about yet. But there are some gifts, and one of the gifts was actually slowing down. Even when you talked about that awakening, we couldn't have had that awakening if we hadn't had the pandemic, because people had to be locked up in their homes. People had to have slowed down to the point where they could actually pay attention to something outside of their normal reality.
Yeah.
So I think that that's one of the things that I'm really grateful for, is that it did give us a chance to wake up to some other things. And it also, I think, gave us a chance on a personal level to reset. So I know, just in terms of personal priorities, for us to put things in perspective has been wonderful for me. And so I guess in terms of what I'm looking forward to the most, it's living out those priorities. It's recognizing that when it all comes down to it, we just have to take care of ourselves and our communities, that there's no alternative to it.
And there shouldn't be an alternative. That should be the pleasure. That should be the joy. That should be the everything of it. No, that's fantastic. I'll leave it where, when the pandemic started and we were all locked down and there was no more FOMO because there was nothing you're missing. I have birds that sing outside my house usually in the morning. When we were all locked up, I swear to God, they were all singing opera, and it was like I don't know where they all are, but this is awesome.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, hey, thank you so much for being a leader who cares and keeping us diverse and inclusive and hopefully as equitable and fair as possible. And so really appreciate you being here. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much for the conversation, Mark. I appreciate it.